Hey, Kaitlin.
Hey, Jessica. Happy Friday, everybody.
Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Welcome to Making Sense. I'm Kaitlin Sopoci-Belknap. I moved to a men's national director, and I live in Sacramento, which is where I am right now.
I'm Jessica Munger. I moved to a men's program director, and I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, she, her. And this is Making Sense. This is our weekly broadcast. There's different teams of us who do it each week, and we try to make sense of the news of the week and what's going on around us through the lens of, the work we do to confront corporate power.
So if you're new here, Move to Amend is the campaign to end corporate personhood and get money out of politics through a constitutional amendment called the We the People Amendment that has been introduced in the House of Representatives a month ago, although it doesn't look like it has. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later after we go through the news of the week and give you an update on the campaign. But thanks for making your calls to your Congress members, telling them to sign on and support the We the People Amendment. It's House Joint Resolution 48. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. So what do you want to start with in terms of news this week, Jessica?
Let's see. Well, I just start at the top here. I guess we should talk about Colombia. There is ongoing demonstrations happening. Lots and lots of people in the streets right now. This uprising was initially sparked by a tax reform proposal, which I think has now been withdrawn, but they have since expanded their scope. So they're also denouncing rampant police brutality and broader social and economic demands. So they're really showing up in the streets of Colombia, and it's pretty inspiring and also difficult. There's over 24 protesters have been killed. The numbers kind of vary depending on sources, but certainly people have been killed and people are missing. And this erupted against a US-backed government of the right-wing president, Ivan Duque, and his neoliberal economic policies, which the people are seeing and they're calling out and they're demanding, change. So that's pretty big news.
And Colombia is really struggling with COVID right now as well. So these protests are happening at a time where they're in a really deadly third wave of COVID cases, which is also happening in other countries as well, a number of places in Latin America. But obviously, we also have been hearing about India that is really struggling right now, too. So to that end, maybe we should talk about the vaccines as well in the news this week around the waivers. So we were really surprised. We actually wrote an email blast that we were going to send to our list about the intellectual property rights of corporations coming before the health and safety of the world's population around COVID, because the United States and the Biden administration had promised during the election that they would support waiving patents for the COVID vaccines so that other countries would have more access. And then initially, Biden walked back on that promise and was not willing to push for the waiver of patents. But this week he announced, or the White House announced, that they were in support of the vaccine waivers, which I have to say was really good and seemed like came from a good amount of pressure from certain members of Congress and also the public, kind of exposing that he had made this promise during the campaign and that it looked really bad that the United States isn't willing to help, especially, as we are seeing what's happening in India, although India is not the only place that needs support in this way, but their numbers are just so devastating and there are so many people who are dying that I think they felt like it was, looking really bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you want to kind of take the next chapter, because this is all something that really actually happens at the WTO level, the World Trade Organization, which is run by consensus. And so the United States had been one of the holdout countries that was refusing to support requiring companies to waive their patents to make it more accessible and to make it possible so that other companies could actually start making the vaccine, so there would be more of them.
Right. So now I think we've got Germany in the way, Angela Merkel, and that feels really difficult. There's like a lot of ways, I suppose, that aid could be like given in terms of getting out the vaccine, but this is such an important piece of it because we can't be depending on like a charity model that is just like people giving away their vaccines. That's an important part of it too, that the United States has vaccines that it could give away, but the intellectual property rights to this are a major piece of this, so that
and I saw this morning that France is also saying that they're, Macron is saying he's not sure that he supports the waiver either. So the waiver was first proposed by India and South Africa in October, and the United States and other wealthy nations from Europe have been blocking it. But then the other piece of it all is that there are countries in Europe that are exporting vaccines and making sure that other countries have access, because the reality is that even with the releasing of the patents, it's not like they're going to be able to like make vaccines like that. And so in the immediate term, what is needed is countries that are wealthy, that these companies that have helped finance these vaccines and the making of them for the companies that are now making billions of dollars off of being the providers, they need to export some of their vaccines and share them. And so Europe is, basically critiquing the Biden administration in the United States, because right now we have a policy that we will not share any vaccines with any other countries. So that needs to change. But I also think that we need to pay attention to I think the reason why these countries that front for corporations like the United States, Germany, France, Great Britain often, why they don't want this waiver is the precedent that it sets. And the fact that, intellectual property of corporations is one of the, most important pieces of what the WTO does, and shields companies from having to share medication, which generally speaking is actually produced and, researched and developed using, taxpayer citizen dollars. So the WTO is like not at all good normally on this, and they do not want to have a precedent that would allow, the argument to be made that other medications should also be opened up and shared.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's important to note too that there are a lot of other things that there are patents to that are being withheld besides just the vaccines, right? So there's like respirators and other technology that are, help therapeutics and diagnostics and stuff like that are also being withheld because of intellectual property rights and stuff like that. So it's important that, it's not a simple solution in terms of like what people are doing right now and willing to do, but it is in terms of, these intellectual property like regulations and gates are fairly new, right? These weren't always in place, and this is a very like violent way to go about engaging the world during a pandemic. So it's like it's been said before, lives before profit. Obviously, you have these countries who are saying like, we are dying, you please share with us, and the US is like, well, I don't know if that's going to be profitable for some of our big pharmaceutical companies, so why don't you wait?
And as Greg says, I mean, yes, what we're saying is that international law under a private entity, the pro-corporate TRIPS agreement, which is part of the World Trade Organization, trumps U.S. policy preferences. And that's absolutely true. So even though we have been able to push on our president to get them to shift their policy position as it relates to this in a way it doesn't really matter, even though these are U.S. corporations largely. But the Pfizer vaccination was developed in part with a German corporation. So if Angela Merkel wants to block it in the WTO on behalf of that, then the effect is the same. So that's also a question that I have. My cynical self is like, it seemed like Europe was sort of surprised and that the Biden administration didn't give them a heads up, but I don't know. The number of times, for example, that Congress people are like, if you sync my bill, I'll sync your bill later when you need me to, and that's absolutely a thing they can and do. And there's no reason to believe that, world superpowers don't have similar, like, I need to look like the good guy here. Can you block me? And later next time I'll take care of it. I'm not saying that we know any reason to believe that that's for sure what's up, but the kind of collective agenda of prioritizing corporate rule is one at the end of the day that they all hold.
Yeah, that's the where the primary loyalties lie, I think, internationally. So, and that's really sad. And then there's this Vax Live, I think it's called, concert, which is sort of like a Live Aid sort of thing with
super weird. All these people who totally don't support sharing the vaccine at all are the ones
right. So it's like finance. There, it's to encourage the sort of charity model, right, that we talked about before. And the funders are the very same folks who are actively blocking efforts for the WTO TRIPS waiver. So that's
like Bill Gates. Let's name names here. Yeah. So that's tomorrow, this concert, which is kind of just like a giant propaganda, weird charity thing where instead of actually, providing mutual aid as a country in this global pandemic that affects everyone, it's actually, and the Biden administration, and it's kind of like a government private collusion, propaganda, feel good. Like, let's pat ourselves on the back for helping the poor brown people in other places that aren't developed enough to have their own vaccines, which is...
It very much has that vibe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't reinforce anything helpful at all.
No, it's super gross, actually. So I see somebody asking if we're going to have a discussion and move to amend. Yeah. So, just for anybody who's new, the way this program works, we make sense of the news of the week from a lens of looking at, corporate rule and democracy movements. And then we always do give an update about move to amend, and you're welcome to ask questions at any point. And so we will get to that.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody.
And feel free to say anything you want. As you can see, we can put comments up. So if you have something to add to the discussion, or if you've got a question, feel free to put it in whatever channel you're listening. And if you're tuning in not live, then we will do our best to answer questions after the fact too. So I wanted to talk about here, we'll show that for everybody else. Something that happened yesterday and the day before. So this week was a week to raise awareness about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls that has been happening for years. There are a huge number of women and children, girls, who have gone missing or turned up murdered on Indian reservations, near Indian reservations, and clearly being targeted. Oftentimes these are communities that are next to oil and gas extraction, giant operations where there are basically like towns that form of the workers who are men, mostly white men, who are doing the work of oil extraction on or near Native people's land, because that's how that works in this country. And it seems like there's a real connection between those people and who is targeting these women, and law enforcement has basically done nothing. Most of these cases are either completely not investigated in any meaningful way. They are left unopened, or they're left open, I mean. And there's, almost no resolution. And it is, really an epidemic that is happening in the Native community all over this country, in communities all over this country. So this week was a week to raise the awareness of that, because most people who are not impacted, so white people or, other people who are not Native people, have no idea about this. So that's really important for us to understand, for us to support and elevate and put pressure on law enforcement not to look the other way. And, potentially that's also partly because oftentimes police are the ones who are involved in targeting, whether it's, Native women who have almost no voice and power, or, sex workers as well. I mean, there's a chronic problem of police targeting victims who have no recourse or no leverage to come back to them. And so that was, that happened on, what was it? Wednesday was the main day, and you saw, I think it was mostly on Instagram, organizations. Go ahead.
Sorry, there's a delay. Well, it's important to say that like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and social media is really important right now for this, because it's not being covered by any like news sources. I mean, maybe Democracy Now! Once in a while or something, but like you were saying, you just don't hear about this anywhere. And so, bringing attention to this is like really relies on people and social media and like.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I kind of didn't say it as explicitly as it is that it, like, oftentimes these cases are not even logged in the Department of Justice website, or database. I mean, so there's not even a record. It's just a disappearing of these women. And I mean, it's sort of strikes me as similar to something that happens oftentimes in border towns in Mexico as well, in Juarez, where, women are just disappeared, and then there's not even a recording of it. That's how little their lives matter to, the authorities. That it's reported, families have put out information trying to find these women, and, law enforcement doesn't even care enough to put them in the database as missing people. So horrific, very horrific. And the people who have been raising this have been Native people, groups that are organizing, and then, just Native individuals who are affected and, who know people or who care. So there was a lot. I saw a good amount of, talking about this, posts that had been generated, videos that were made, really oftentimes very artfully, beautifully made to make it, something that is compelling and to honor these women who are forgotten and disappeared and ignored. There was a call to wear red because a number of tribes believe that, ancestors and spirits only can see red. And so to be seen for these women who are, probably dead, most all of them, to see that we, have not forgotten about them. I wake up on Thursday morning and see weird, for anybody who, knows Instagram, and Facebook has this too, the stories area. And there were all these people that I noticed, had deleted stories. I was like, that's kind of weird. And then I sort of realized wait a minute, I think those are all people who were posting about this. And then I looked, and my stories that I had shared from a couple different organizations were gone. And so, I just kind of happened to notice it and reached out to people that I knew and said, was this, it's hard to remember what was that? Was it your dinner, or was it something important? Right. A picture of your dinner, I mean. But then lo and behold, it seemed like there was a pattern. And then the groups that had put out the posts that people were sharing came forward and said, our posts have been deleted in the middle of the night or early in the morning, which is just so gross and scary. I mean, we know that corporations, social media corporations are censoring, people oftentimes. There's, shadow banning that happens, that if you're talking about things that are seen as controversial, they can be taken down. But the fact that this, when the whole point was to raise awareness for a group of people who are invisible to the larger society, and that's and therefore, as they're disappearing and being targeted for, in hate crimes and probably, horrible sexual assault as well. And just, something really gross that we as a country need to confront and look at and understand is happening and do something about it. And has nothing to do with the bottom line of Instagram. I mean, sometimes it makes sense, what the, right, what's being hidden from us if it connects to the politics of Facebook, which is who owns Instagram, and Mark Zuckerberg and friends. But it just seems like, just a very cruel, in what world would that need to be obscured? Why? Who are you protecting? And why would you do that?
That is a really good question. Yeah, it feels really dark that it's like there's not a direct line between censoring this content and profit. And that indicates that there's something deeper and really dark. And that's super disturbing. I saw that too. And I saw there's an organization, let's see, on Thursday, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, based in Montana, issued a press release that said the organization was disappointed to hear from advocates and community members that the recent Instagram stories concerning missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and relatives had been removed or taken down overnight, including many of which were shared in support of the National Week of Action, which was happening then too. So it was like a well-known thing that there was, and Congress too recently, I think, passed, a proclamation, White House. So this was just, I think, this year that the White House proclamation issued, by Joe Biden on Wednesday, May 15th, declaring it Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Awareness Day. So it was a thing. And then Facebook/Instagram decided to take that content down. And this organization was reporting that there were, I don't know where the number is now. It was around 100 of these that were taken down, but that's just anybody who reported it to them, So it seems like there was a lot going on.
And there really wasn't that much. In pockets, I saw it in several places, but it sort of is this is the way social media works. There are pockets and bubbles of that are talking about the same thing. And that's sort of the point, and then as you share it, you can kind of amplify beyond. So it's this is our commons. This is our area where we, this is how we can talk to each other. This is how we can spread the word about things. This was true before COVID, but now especially, I know a lot of places are not still locked down, but we should be, mostly staying insular. And so the internet and social media is the main vehicle that we have to spread awareness about anything. And, I think you hit the key. For me, it's where's the profit? What is the bottom line that would need this to be removed? This official day that activists have been able to actually get the national government to acknowledge as a phenomenon that's happening, and then a private corporation can just decide to just wipe it out. People that are already wiped out and targeted and visibilized. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And there's no explanation. It just was gone, so it's just creepy too. Oh, was it a glitch? Well, I don't know. Well, but now nobody knows. Just disappeared.
Right. Totally. Content
just seems like a cruel targeting to just basically say, no, remember, you don't matter. That is the position of the United States. So don't forget.
Yeah. The censorship. They've been censoring leftists they've been censoring a lot of people on lots of platforms for a long time, but also I don't know, recently it's just so much sex educators anybody working in like decriminalization efforts for sex work. There's a lot of, people talking more about violence in like against Palestinians, and that's also being censored and taken down. It's really intense right now.
So let's see, was there anything else that news that caught our eye in terms of a connection to corporate rule and democracy that we wanted to share? Jessica, I think those were the main things I had on my list.
It was a rough week. It felt like, so there's a lot more to be said about all of those things, but I think that's what we wanted to make sure we touched on.
All right. So we can go to, well, actually, maybe we could take 1 second to take this question here. I was going to say we can move to amend, but this is an issue that's going on right now too. So Jake Hose asks, how do you feel about how donors are not highlighted by politicians until a corporation's donors that are withholding till a corporation donates and is holding with support, such as that of the corporations withholding funding in Georgia because of the new voter laws? Yeah, such a good question. Honestly, that one's really tough. To me, this issue is sort of similar to like when Trump was banned from social media and Twitter and whatnot. It's like, this should not be. Corporations have no business participating in the political, cultural shaping process. They're economic entities. They are tools that, come into existence because our government allows them to, properly understood, they should have a specific role and not go beyond it. And so is not appropriate for, corporations to be who decides what kind of speech is acceptable to come from the White House. It should not be up to corporations to decide, what laws are okay. It's a dangerous precedent. On the other hand, it really does show like we don't have leverage. So the only entities that have leverage over our government are corporations. And so it makes sense that people are trying to shift their attention to push and pressure companies to use their power for an agenda. In this case, in Georgia, it's like, of course, the new voter laws are really important to ensure that people have access to vote. But companies are not the ones who should be deciding, whether or not that is supported or opposed. It's just a really dangerous precedent, I think. I don't know, Jessica, do you have, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what you said. It's like it's a point of power. It's a pillar, so it makes sense to use that to like. If that's a place where power is concentrated under this system, which shouldn't exist this way, then fine, but it's, I agree with what you said totally.
And I mean, similar to like what happened with Trump, it's like, okay, yes, I believe that Trump should have been censored. You should not be allowed to, but not just because of the insurrection on January 6th, right? Trump has been saying, hateful, violent speech for years, and it's not appropriate. I actually think that Germany handled what to do about Nazis right. You're not allowed to talk about Nazis. You're not allowed to put swastikas in a public place. You're not allowed to like foment Nazi ideology. And that is how Nazis should be handled. And Trump hangs out with Nazis. So, we should have a similar like zero tolerance policy in this country. I do not believe in free speech all the time, always, whatever anybody wants to say, because it's dangerous. And, we should have values as a society that are, not hateful. And when people try to organize around hateful values and ideas, that should be shut down. But
fascism.
Right, exactly. Like you do not tolerate fascism.
No.
Nothing good comes of that. On the other hand, what we saw is like, liberals being really excited and happy about like Trump finally getting shut up. And then, and others too, but I'm just sort of using Trump as an umbrella there. But then who do they come for right next? And it's like, yes, the far right wing to some degree, but then they're going to lump, folks who are working against police brutality, people who are standing up for Black Lives Matter, people who are speaking the word Palestinian and talking about Palestine, and so like, there might be like one tiny little victory for a second, but then the guns get turned on us, because who are the main dissidents against corporate rule, and who are the main people that are actually threatened by Twitter or Facebook? It's the fact that we want to communalize and publicize the mechanisms that they're using to make money on us. And so they're going to use any leverage that they're able to get. And the same will be true of laws. It's like, okay, for all of the good that maybe is happening for a second in Georgia in terms of pressuring that state not to disenfranchise Black people, when is this going to turn up and for it to then become perfectly acceptable for a company? I mean, if we want corporations out of the political process, inviting them in when we can get them to agree with us does not help move us towards getting corporations out.
They're not on our team at the end of the day. That's an illusion. And I think it's important to note that the president has said that anarchists should be arrested, and that, lumping people into saying that ideologies and ideas for liberation are, arrestable. And that is super dangerous to have in the air as you're dealing with like this type of censorship.
I'm putting up some comments here, even ones that maybe, Mary Beth, maybe you mean slightly different than I said. I hear you. I believe in free speech. I also believe that there's no place for allowing any kind of momentum and traction to be gained by people who want to exterminate other people or, murder them, hurt them, target them. That's not okay. It's not okay. And we absolutely, I think, can strike that line as a society. We just don't try.
I mean, we already don't have free speech, right? Entirely. That's an illusion. You can't just go to work and say anything you want. You can't just run around in public and say anything you want. That's actually not true,
Yeah. Okay. Here she added it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And which is what, Trump engaged in numerous examples of hate speech and, and created an environment where that was, instead of whispered in the dark, something that was put right out there front and center. And, we'll be dealing with and potentially seeing even more of the ramifications of what happens when we allow that it's not like that went away with Trump not being president anymore right now.
Yeah. And Greg's point here is, I think, really important, that often corporations and celebrities and whoever is going to make money off of it is going to swoop in as soon as it's
as soon as we've done the work to shift the culture, they're like, oh, we're here.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, exactly.
Which is exactly what happened with Trump too. It was like when the insurrection happened, it was like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have given him a platform that helped him actually become president of the United States. I mean, that's maybe less Twitter and more on mainstream like television media, but then everybody turned, and then it's the safe thing to do. And
the profitable thing to do. I mean, it reminds me of, the movement for like queer liberation. And like, as soon as, it was like, whoa, like we're not touching that. And then as soon as organizers shifted culture, it's unprofitable to not support LGBTQ people. So they're making money off of it now. And so that's why, I mean, like, they're not on our team. Right.
100%. Well, thanks for raising that question, Jake. It was a good question. And, there's not in our current conditions, there's not a super straightforward answer. It's complicated, but I think where move to amend does come down. And that was why, sorry about that truck. We sent out a message and made clear that we were opposed to, Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, being the ones to censor Trump, because it's not an appropriate role for corporations to have. And it just reinforces the idea that they're the ones who actually make the decisions and run the show. And and that's okay, and that we should rely on them to do that. And hopefully we'll just have benevolent corporate masters and like, no. We believe in democracy.
Yeah. Right. And I want to, this is a little further up, but I just wanted to acknowledge Karen Grissom's comment up about how the vaccine situation brings back memories of big pharma blocking India during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which is very true and still a very lasting situation. And there's a lot of things about the way that COVID has been handled nationally and globally that reminds of that time in history, which was such a time of loss. And, some of us know better than others that the government doesn't care if we live or die at the end of the day. And some of our communities learned that the hard way. But that's certainly being seen again. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. I think it's important that we understand how that history was paralleling, how what's happening now is paralleling that history in some ways.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with the amount of like fawning and adoration and thanking and gratitude that people are showing as they're talking about getting their vaccines and talking about, which brand they're getting and, like equating it to Harry Potter houses and shit like that. It's like Johnson & Johnson is potentially responsible for like giving me ovarian cancer from baby powder with asbestos in it, and countless other women. Pfizer is not a good actor in the world. And so we also, I think we're getting like losing sight of what's going on here. And it's all just part of the fact that, we are just indoctrinated in so many places. And then we help perpetuate it ourselves when we're not critical about the fact that this is corporate rule and not democracy.
Yeah. I saw a take about the vaccine that was saying that we shouldn't use the waiver because it would be punishing these great companies who have really come in and saved us at a time when we were so, we need I'm sorry, what world?
They made billions of dollars off of research and development we paid for.
Yeah. And they poison us all the time. I literally found out that there was poison in my dental floss this week. I am not saying thank you to Johnson & Johnson. Sorry.
No.
Am I glad that I have partaken in this thing that is going to help us move towards not having a COVID epidemic? Yes. But why?
Well, and we also don't know for sure that there aren't going to be poisonous components of these vaccines too. It seems like it will be okay. And we're not anti-vax here. But at the same time, remember your healthy doses of skepticism, and because there's a long precedent of the, like we talked about at the beginning, the priority on human life is not what the priority is. The priority is profit. And so you get, don't get confused. Don't get confused, even though, sometimes there can be things that are good that come from it. There's also a lot of bad, and it's because our values are all skewed in this society because profit matters more than anything else.
Yeah. Just because you get a good product or a good solution from a company doesn't mean that you have to think that
fall over being grateful.
Have its babies. Calm
they
down.
Made plenty of money. That transaction is
yeah. Pfizer's gonna be okay.
Yeah. So, all right. That got people going too on the vaccine. And it's true. It's they have a built-in, it's not like anybody altruistically was we need to solve this pandemic problem. They have a built-in, it will be great for them if COVID continues on. And if the vaccines are required every year, then that means an endless supply of money forever. And that is why the patents are really, what they don't want it to release, because they don't want this to be a cheap opportunity for this problem to be solved. They want to be the ones who are, we rely on forever and ever.
Absolutely. Like under a system of corporate power, sickness is profitable. So there's a profit motive to making people sick. Like, come on, obviously, it's like, we don't have to, the people who actually have the altruistic intentions and care about making people better are the people doing community work, the people, like a lot of like nurses and a lot of teachers and people who are running the community, and moms, right? Happy Mother's Day. Like there are like people who are working to make the world a better place. And then there's people who are making profit off of selling things. And, I don't know why we need to have loyalty and love for them.
Well, and they totally understand this. So we're stupid if we don't, honestly, we're like totally missing the point. I mean, what was it? I'm not sure I'm going to get all the details right, but Goldman Sachs had like a paper that they issued talking to their, kind of like medical related, companies that they finance, showing and talking about how like solving people's health issues is not helpful for the bottom line. So, that's why it's so important that what happens is, ongoing treatment to alleviate symptoms. You want to keep people alive, but sick, because that's how you maximize profit out of any individual case of illness. They totally understand this, like some accountants penciled it out and they were like, hey, it's just numbers. And if we don't get that, then we're missing what's really going on.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Move to Amend and just give an update on where things are at. And then any questions that you guys have about Move to Amend more broadly, happy to answer those. Normally, a lot of the people who tune in are in the loop, so we're going to assume you are. But if there's anything you want us to fill in, let us know. So right now, our focus is on the We the People Amendment in the House. As we mentioned earlier in the show, it has been introduced in the House. It's House Joint Resolution 48. It was introduced on April 5th. However, a weird thing has happened to us, which apparently is rare, so rare that congressional staffers have been very confused about the situation. So our amendment has been introduced, but we wanted to keep the number 48, which is the same number that we've had for the last 4 Congresses. It's been introduced 5 times and we've had 48, 4 of those 5 times. And so Pramila Jayapal is our lead. Her office kind of like earmarked that number with the clerk, who is responsible for the, like bureaucratic administrative introduction of anything in the House. And I think what happened was back at the beginning of April, they were getting close and they thought that, probably we would see them get up to 48 pretty quickly. So they just went ahead and went through the process of doing the introduction. But then for whatever reasons, Congress actually hasn't been introducing that many joint resolutions, which are amendments. And then there are a few other things that fall under joint resolutions. And so they're actually only up to 45 right now. And so 48 hasn't technically hit yet. So the amendment is introduced. Offices can be added on by contacting Pramila Jayapal's office. So you can contact your representative's office and tell them that you want them to sign on to House Joint Resolution 48. However, it's not going to like officially show up on congress.gov and the databases that Congress members see too until they get to 48. Which we hope will be next week. Congress will be back in session next week. They just need to do 46 and 47, and then we'll be there. I hope that there are 2 Congress members out there with some proposal that they've got. There's like 6 proposals to keep the Supreme Court at the current number of 9 that were introduced a couple weeks ago. So it could be anything though, but they just need to have 2 more, and then we'll be up to 48, and then it'll be like normal introduction, even though we already had that moment.
Right,
so
right.
It's a little weird and stupid and confusing, and like bad luck for us that this happened, because it has been confusing. We've been focusing on a list of about 135 target offices that are targets because they're members of the Progressive Caucus, or they have positions and policies that they support that are in line with the We the People amendment, or they represent districts where we have passed ballot initiatives where we have already, the voters have given a mandate that they should support our resolution. And so those are our targets. If you go to movetoamend.org/117 campaign, you can see that list of targets and see if your member is on there. You can also see who has already signed on, since there's no other place to see it, but you can see it on our website. And if your rep is signed on, then it's a good idea to thank them. And we want them to know that this matters to you. So if they've done the right thing, tell them that, so that they're sure to sign on again, because every new Congress, we have to get everybody to sign back on. So that's what we're focused on right now. And we really hope that this official introduction will happen next week. We don't quite know where we're at, because there are other folks who have added. We do know that there were 50 initial co-sponsors, 51 if you count Representative Jayapal. Our goal is 100 this year. And I think there's probably, at least half a dozen, if not more than that, who will probably be added right away after. We do have some offices that have confirmed yes. But there's still a lot of work to do. So your help, that's where we're most trying to ask everybody to plug into the campaign right now, so that we can get to that 100. And then that'll allow us to focus on other things like the Senate, and also some of our, movement building and education work that that actually is oftentimes the real crux of the work that we do.
Yeah. So let's get this done. And it's really helpful, actually, if a bunch of people call. Like, the tactic is at this point kind of annoy them. Like, you can call every day to your representative and say, hey, I'm calling again. I would really like for you to come on as a co-sponsor to HJR 48. Do it. That's really helpful. That 2-minute call, it doesn't seem like it makes a big difference, because it's hard to get our representatives to listen to us, but actually that goes a long way, and we've heard that over the years. So your daily or weekly call is really appreciated.
Yeah, so it's so easy, and it really does make a big difference. It really does. I mean, we're telling you this not because we're making it up. We are hearing from congressional staffers. I just heard this week in 2 different meetings that said, one person said, we're getting a lot of calls on this issue, but not specifically for your amendment. So it's really important that you make clear when you call that this is the bill that you want them to support. And you can call it the We the People Amendment, but for them, House Joint Resolution 48 is the most important thing to say. A couple of people asking where you can see the list. So if you go again to movetoamend.org/117 campaign, and then you go down a little bit, there's graphics, and everybody who is signed on has a thank you graphic. Everybody on the target list who is not signed on has a missing graphic. That's not everybody in Congress. These are our top targets. So if your Congress member is not in either of those 2 places, you can still contact them and ask them to sign on. It's just that they're not one of our top targets that we're really trying to zero in on this year. But if your rep is on that target list and they have a missing graphic, then you are like one of our most important people. So at least make calls. But if you could help us in organizing a meeting with their office, we've met with, I would say, probably like 3/4, if not more, of those targets already. Some offices are not responding to us at all. And because of COVID, we can't just like walk in. So maybe some point.
We need you to help us. HJR 48. That's 48.
Yes.
The We the People Amendment. And it's been introduced by Representative Pramila Jayapal. So you can let them know that, and that it'll be, up on the website soon, hopefully, by the time you can get in touch with them, hopefully. So that really goes a long way for us. Thank you. And just to say, like, there is so much energy and people dedicated to making this happen. The amount of volunteers and constituents all around who have been doing these virtual meetings with their representatives, it's amazing. People are really stepping up to make this happen. So thank you for those of you who've been involved in this campaign and working really hard to meet with people who are kind of hard to meet with, and telling them why you care about this. It really goes a long way. Like, they'll meet with us and we can tell them the stuff about the amendment, but what actually matters, and it sounds cheesy, but it's true, what actually matters is like constituents being there in these meetings, making the phone calls and telling them why you care about this. So thank you to everyone who's helped out so much, and not even helped out, done this, led this. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I have been like the main person who has done the lobby meetings for Move to Amend for the last several years. And then this year we divided it up and are really doing the work to recruit constituents, because normally, it's trips to DC and sometimes phone calls. And we have in the past done a conference and lobby day in DC, and none of that is, stuff we can do in this world right now. So, but the thing that is good is that it does make it so that you don't have to travel to Washington, D.C. to get in front of, in some cases, even the congressperson. I met with 2 congresspeople last week, and oftentimes it's also just their staff. But the fact that we can do that virtually now makes such a big difference. And we just got Representative Adriano Espaillat from New York, for example, in a meeting that I did with some constituents. I have been working on that office for like 3 years. I met with their staff and they're like, yeah, we're not sure at this time. And then one meeting with a bunch of constituents, and the congressman came on himself and was like, I support the We the People amendment, I'm in. So it does make a huge difference. So if you see your rep's face on that page, 117 campaign, we need you. Let us know. Raise your hand. There's a place on that page where you can sign up. And again, if your rep isn't on the list, then we can still work with you to set up a meeting and support you in doing that. And there actually are a number of people who are not on the target list. I just did an analysis this week of who has signed on to the Green New Deal and who has signed on to Medicare for All as 2 big, visionary legislative proposals with a nexus to corporate rule and democracy. So those are 2 that we track, and we look at the co-sponsors on those. And there's actually a surprisingly large number of people signed on to both of those 2 bills. And some of them are not on our target list, but they would make good targets too. So don't be shy if your rep isn't on our target list. Let's go get them anyway.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's where we're at on that. Oh, one other thing I want to say, okay, this isn't a Move to Amend thing, but Jessica and I are both part of a new podcast called Agitated Podcast that is a project of Democracy Unlimited and a media collaborative program that is going to be under the umbrella of Democracy Unlimited, which is our sister organization that helped start Move to Amend and does the educational work. And the Move to Amend Education Fund is kind of under Democracy Unlimited as well. So it's not exactly like it's not a Move to Amend project. And if you are super excited about the Democratic Party and the powers that be in some ways, then maybe this wouldn't be your cup of tea. But if you are, structurally agitated at our system and you want to see fundamental systemic change and you want to talk about it kind of from a personal lens of like what it is to try and be a good person in this society when all of the systems are stacked against us with an agenda of profit over people, we're exploring some of that. And our first episode launched last week, and our next episode will launch next week, and we'd love you to check it out. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. It's Agitated Podcast, Mary Beth.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. We'd love to have your ear for a little while. Also, what would be helpful is if you could sign the petition. Obviously, probably a lot of you have, but make sure that your friends and family have signed. It really goes a long way. When we're doing these lobby visits with our Congress people, if we can go in and say, hey, look, there are 1,000 people in your district who we are representing today, who have signed the motion to amend, that's really impactful. And like your calls are meaningful and go a long way, so does that number. So it's not just like sign a petition and go away. It's really an organizing tool that's that's impactful for us. So please do spread the word and get those petition signatures. And also please check out the movement education program. It's curriculum that you can go through at your own pace. It's free, it's online, it's available for individuals and groups. And it's a lot of things, but it has to do with movement building and how to create spaces that are, that are welcoming to a diverse movement, and how history impacts our organizing and our movement. And we just really love for you to check that out. That link is there. And also all of this work needs to be funded. That's the bottom line is we don't get a lot of funding. We don't get any funding from political parties or like corporations, obviously, or big family foundations. We are funded by you all and by ourselves. This is entirely a grassroots operation. So every dollar really does mean a lot. And if you can give monthly, that's the most impactful way to give, because then we can anticipate what our budget is for the next month and know the work that we can do. So that's a really important way to be part of this movement, is to help fund the work. So movetoamend.org/donate. And if you can make a monthly donation, that is the most helpful. So thank you so much for all the ways that you all do all the things.
A lot of people don't realize how grassroots Move to Amend is, because we've made a lot of headway, and it's hard to believe that a group that's as small as we are has been able to get an amendment introduced in Congress 5 times, and get up to 75 co-sponsors in the House, and get out there in kind of at least the progressive public consciousness. But the reality is that we're tiny and we're mighty. But the only thing that allows us to be mighty is your support. So whether that's pitching in with your time or your dollars or helping us spread the word, all of those things are so important. And sharing the petition is like so easy, no brainer. It takes like 2 minutes of your time to sign yourself. And then when you do that, you'll get a link to spread the word. So if you're on any social media, please share that motion to amend link weekly, and bring your friends in so that we have the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Well, this is an hour. I think that this is a good place to leave it, right? Anything else you want to add?
No,
definitely want to say.
No, go
sorry,
ahead.
There's a delay. No, you go ahead. Well, I wanted to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers.
Yes,
all the mothers of all kinds. And remember, we talked a little bit about this before we came on. Mother's Day was originally proposed by an anti-war activist, and it was an effort to raise consciousness about the need to end war. It has turned into quite the consumerist holiday. So maybe instead of buying something for your mom, spend some time with her if you can, or with another mother. Mothers always could use support of like pitching in to watch their children, or go get their groceries for them this week. Or my mom always wanted help in her garden, and we were always pretty bad about offering it. So do those kinds of things.
Yeah, just something nice for a mom. Mom makes the world go round. So thanks, moms. We love you. And no more war.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks so much, Alfonso, for producing as always. And next week, do we know? Greg and Shelly, we think.
That'll be a good one.
I'm not sure if Shelly knows that, but
we'll tell her.
There will be 2 fabulous people here to make sense of the news. Quite possibly it will be Greg and Shelly next week. Take care,
Thanks
everybody.
for being here, everyone. Bye.